My son's wife kicked me out of my house and put someone else in. Then I rewrote the will. I never imagined I would feel the sting of rejection in the home I had built with my own hands. I'm Margaret, born in 1945 in a small town outside Chicago. Back in 2010, when my son Michael told me he and his new wife, Clara, wanted to move in, I felt a mix of excitement and relief. After my husband passed, the house had felt unbearably quiet, every room echoing with memories of laughter, arguments, and the occasional stubborn silence that only decades of marriage can bring. I thought having family around again would fill that quiet, warm my evenings, and give me someone to share my stories with. The first few weeks were as I imagined: Michael busy with work, Clara bustling about, cooking meals, and helping with small chores. She smiled often, chatted casually, complimented my furniture and antiques. I was cautious, but the glow of having family in the house made me let my guard down. I even showed Clara my old recipe books, the ones with notes from my mother and grandmother tucked in between pages. "These are treasures," she said. "Thank you for letting me see them." I believed her. But the first sign of unease came subtly. My favorite armchair, the one by the window where the morning sun hit just right, began to be occupied more often by Clara. She would stretch out in it, claiming she needed a quiet corner to read, leaving me with the less comfortable chairs in the living room. At first, I brushed it off. Perhaps she didn't realize it was my chair, perhaps she thought I was being fussy. I tried to laugh about it. "Remember when Aunt Mabel tried to bake cookies at midnight and set off the smoke alarm?" I'd say, hoping humor would smooth the tension. She'd chuckle politely but always return to that chair, smirking like she belonged. Then came the little disappearances. A gold bracelet I'd worn since my wedding vanished for a week before being found in Clara's bag, her explanation so casual I almost believed it was an accident. My voice started being ignored in conversations. Decisions about minor things like the dinner menu, the flowers in the living room, even the arrangement of the furniture began to happen without me. I'd suggest a vase on the table, and she'd nod politely but place it somewhere else entirely. I tried speaking up gently at first. "I thought we agreed the vase would go here," I said one evening. She smiled, a sweet, patronizing smile. "Oh, Margaret, I just thought this looked better," she said, sweeping her hand as if she were rearranging a display in a store. One evening, Michael left for work earlier than usual, and I heard Clara on the phone, her voice sharp, impatient. I couldn't make out every word, but when she hung up, she laughed softly, almost cruelly, and muttered, "It'll all be done soon." My chest tightened. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, just the stresses of moving and settling in, but my intuition whispered that something wasn't right. The tipping point came on a rainy afternoon. I was in the kitchen, tending to a pot of soup, when I heard the front door open. Instead of Michael or Clara greeting me, a stranger appeared, a young woman I had never met, introduced as Clara's cousin, moving in temporarily. I froze, spoon in midair, trying to process the audacity. "Excuse me," I managed. Clara looked at me with that infuriatingly sweet smile that masked steel. "Margaret, we thought it would be nice to have her stay for a while," she said, voice calm, almost rehearsed. "We just need some space to reorganize things." Space. That word felt like a knife in my chest. I tried reasoning with Michael when he came home later. "I didn't expect another person here. Why didn't you discuss this with me?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and Clara. "Mom, I didn't think it would be a big deal. Clara's just trying to help." Help. I realized then that my own son, the boy I had nurtured, had taken Clara's side without hesitation. I felt an unfamiliar ache in my chest, a mixture of betrayal and heartbreak. The next weeks were a blur of small cruelties. Clara rearranged my room without asking, took over areas I had always cherished, and ignored my attempts to assert myself. Each day, the house that once radiated warmth became a place where I felt invisible. The kitchen, once my sanctuary, now belonged to her. She critiqued my cooking subtly, rearranged the pantry, and even labeled my jars with stickers as if claiming ownership. I remember one morning trying to make tea, and she said, "Oh, Margaret, We usually just use the kettle in the guest kitchen. It's more convenient. I could feel my own home slipping away, piece by piece. I tried to hold on to dignity, to keep my voice calm, even when I felt my anger simmering beneath polite smiles. I reminded myself that I wasn't powerless, that I had survived my husband's passing and countless challenges before. Still, the sense of helplessness was suffocating. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home, an intruder in the life I had built. Then one afternoon, it happened. Clara stood at the doorway, the cousin in tow, and without preamble, she said, "Margaret, we've decided it's better if you find somewhere else to stay for now. We need the space." My mind froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice quivering. "I mean, you can't stay here. Not right now. We've made other arrangements," she said, her tone disturbingly casual, like informing someone the mail had been delivered. The finality in her words hit me harder than I could have imagined. I packed a small bag, every step heavy with disbelief. Neighbors watched silently as I left the home I had lived in for decades. I wasn't crying in front of them, only moving with quiet dignity, my heart breaking with each step. Michael didn't come to help, and Clara's smile followed me like a shadow. As I walked to the car where a friend had offered temporary refuge, I felt a mixture of sorrow, humiliation, and a strange flicker of determination. That night, in the small guest room of my friend's house, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears come. But with them came clarity. I wasn't powerless. I had resources, I had a mind still sharp enough to think, and I had years of experience with human nature to draw upon. Clara and Michael might have thought they could erase me from my own life, but they had underestimated the quiet strength of someone who had endured loss, heartbreak, and betrayal before. I began to reflect on the house, the possessions, the memories, everything Clara had tried to claim, and I realized I still had control over the most important thing, my will. If they thought the home and my wealth would automatically go to them, they were in for a surprise. I smiled to myself, imagining the shock on their faces, the exact way justice could be served without a single harsh word spoken to them in person. I spent that night drafting mental notes, recalling every small slight, every moment Clara had tried to erase me. It wasn't just about money or property, it was about respect, dignity, and a quiet reminder that betrayal comes with consequences. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt purpose. My heart, though bruised, was steady. Tomorrow, I thought, I will call the lawyer. Tomorrow, I will make sure Clara and Michael learn that no act of cruelty is without a response. And for the first time since being forced out, I felt a surge of hope. They might have taken my house, my armchair, my daily routines, but they hadn't taken my voice, my mind, or my ability to turn the situation around. I closed my eyes that night and whispered softly, "You've got this, Margaret. It's okay to feel hurt, but never forget you still have the power." The quiet determination settled in me, stronger than any anger, sharper than any resentment. The betrayal had opened a door, not just to exile, but to the beginning of my silent, strategic comeback. Quiet resistance wasn't something I had ever needed to practice before, but life has a way of teaching lessons you never asked for. After Clara kicked me out, I stayed with my old friend Doris, a neighbor from years back who had always been like family. Her home was cozy, filled with the scent of fresh bread and warm laughter, a stark contrast to the coldness I'd left behind. Sitting in her living room, sipping tea, I began to breathe again, to let my mind settle into a plan instead of spinning in anger. It was strange, this mix of emotions: hurt, disbelief, but also the tiniest spark of excitement. For the first time, I realized I was no longer constrained by appearances or expectations. I could think freely. I could strategize. I could reclaim power in a way that Clara and Michael would never see coming. Over the next few days, I took long walks, revisiting old haunts, watching people interact, and reflecting on how kindness and loyalty are rare commodities in a world often driven by greed. Doris would comment as I paced the garden, "You're quiet, Margaret. Planning something?" And I would simply smile, knowing that every moment of observation was a thread I could weave into my plan. I remembered every little thing Clara had done: the way she took over my favorite spots, ignored my presence, manipulated Michael into siding with her. Each memory fueled a calm determination rather than anger. I realized the best form of revenge wouldn't be shouting or confrontation. It would be quiet, calculated, and above all, legal. My will. That document, which had seemed like a mere formality for years, had suddenly become the sharpest tool in my arsenal. I contacted my lawyer, an older man named Mr. Hendricks who had known me for decades. He greeted me warmly, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "Margaret, you sound different," he said. I chuckled softly, sitting down across from his mahogany desk. "I've been forced to rethink a few things," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I need to make some changes to my will." He leaned back, pen poised, waiting for my instructions. I laid out my plan carefully. My house, my savings, my jewelry, it would all go to those who truly deserved it. My estranged granddaughter, whom I had never met but had researched and corresponded with through letters, a local charity for the elderly that had always been close to my heart, and even Doris, for the kindness she had shown me when I needed it most. As Mr. Hendricks took notes, I felt a strange thrill. Every change was deliberate, every beneficiary chosen not out of spite, but out of recognition for loyalty and goodness. And then there was Michael and Clara. They would receive nothing. The legal phrasing was precise, the language clear, leaving no room for interpretation or challenge. The thought of them walking into the lawyer's office expecting a windfall, only to be met with an empty inheritance, brought a quiet smile to my face. Life during this period was simple but full. I spent mornings writing letters to my granddaughter, sharing stories of my childhood, my life with Michael, and even the subtle lessons I had learned about human nature. I wanted her to understand not just what she was inheriting, but the legacy of resilience and dignity behind it. In the afternoons, I volunteered at the charity, helping with meals, organizing donations, and talking with other elderly residents. Each act of service grounded me, reminded me of the bigger picture beyond Clara's selfishness. The world outside my own pain became a canvas for patience. I watched neighbors, old friends, and even casual acquaintances, noticing the small gestures of kindness that often go unnoticed. Doris and I would sit in the garden in the evenings, sipping herbal tea and reminiscing. "You know, Margaret, sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact," she would say. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in my chest. My impact would not be loud or chaotic, it would be deliberate, thoughtful, and final. I also began documenting everything Clara had done, every subtle manipulation, every ignored plea, every small act that had chipped away at my peace. It was for my own clarity, not evidence, though the thought that Michael and Clara might later reflect on these records amused me. I wanted my actions to be unmistakable, my message clear, but delivered with grace rather than malice. I realized that revenge, when executed quietly and intelligently, carries a dignity that screaming and confrontation can never achieve. The weeks passed, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I had become a guardian of my own legacy. Each day reinforced my belief that patience, observation, and strategic action are often more powerful than immediate retaliation. Clara and Michael believed that their moment of triumph was permanent, but in truth, they had underestimated the quiet resolve of someone who had weathered storms before. One evening, I reflected on the power of choice. I could have wasted these months lamenting my displacement, nursing resentment, and allowing bitterness to fester. But instead, I had chosen action. I had chosen to direct my resources toward those who would honor them, to empower those who showed loyalty, and to create a future that reflected the values I held dear. The anger had transformed into purpose, grief into strategy, and isolation into clarity. It was during one of these reflective moments that I penned the final touches to the will. Not just the legal language, but a letter addressed to Michael and Clara, explaining, calmly and respectfully, why they were being cut off. No shouting, no insults, just the truth, that betrayal and greed have consequences, that love and respect cannot be assumed, and that my final act was not punishment, but the affirmation of the principles I had lived by. After sealing the documents, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of betrayal had not disappeared, but it had transformed into a sense of control. I knew the day would come when Clara and Michael would confront the reality of my decisions, and when that day arrived, it would be a quiet reckoning, measured and complete. I didn't need to witness their shock. Knowing it awaited them was enough. In the meantime, life continued in its gentle rhythms. I read, I walked, I laughed quietly at the memories of past family antics, like the time Aunt Mabel tried to bake cookies at midnight and filled the house with smoke, and I nurtured connections that were genuine. I realized that, even in exile, one can find sanctuary. Even when displaced, one can cultivate dignity, purpose, and joy. Each small act of kindness I received and returned reinforced my belief that power and respect are not given, they are maintained, quietly but consistently, through integrity and foresight. By the time the day of the will approached, I felt a serene anticipation. I had done everything I could to ensure fairness, justice, and clarity. Michael and Clara believed they were in control, blissfully unaware that the tide had already turned. I had navigated betrayal not with anger, but with patience, planning, and a quiet determination that ensured the consequences would be both unavoidable and fitting. And so I waited, confident in the knowledge that quiet resistance, deliberate and thoughtful, carries a strength that sudden confrontation rarely achieves. My revenge was not loud, it was not impulsive, but it was absolute. Clara and Michael had claimed victory too early, and in that early triumph lay their downfall. I had chosen my moment, shaped it with care, and preserved my dignity through every step. The house they had taken, the possessions they coveted, the authority they assumed, they would soon discover that none of it belonged to them anymore. The day of the will reading arrived with an almost theatrical stillness. I was seated comfortably at Doris's house, a cup of tea in hand, feeling the kind of quiet anticipation that comes from knowing justice is about to unfold exactly as planned. I had not needed to confront Clara or Michael directly. Their sense of entitlement and impatience had already done most of the work for me. All that remained was for the documents to speak on my behalf. I arrived at the lawyer's office just in time to hear the familiar creak of the old wooden door opening. Michael and Clara walked in together, their expressions a mix of smug confidence and barely contained excitement. Clara's eyes flicked around the office, assessing everything as though it belonged to her already. Michael held his head high, trying to appear calm, but there was a tension in his shoulders that betrayed him. They were ready for a windfall they had no right to, yet their anticipation filled the room with a kind of dramatic irony that I savored quietly. Mr. Hendricks welcomed everyone politely and began the formalities, his tone deliberate and measured. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of Margaret Eliza Thompson," he announced, glancing briefly at me with a knowing look. "I will read the document aloud, ensuring clarity for all parties involved." I could feel Clara's subtle twitch, the small sharpening of her expression, and Michael's jaw tighten ever so slightly. They had no idea what was coming. When Mr. Hendricks began to read the first portions of the will, it started innocuously enough. Personal belongings, keepsakes, letters they went to individuals who had shown kindness and loyalty. I could almost hear the shifting of Clara and Michael's bodies, the first signs of unease. Then came the larger allocations, the house, the savings, and other significant assets. Each line Mr. Hendricks read seemed to weigh heavier in the room. My house, the very home from which I had been ousted, was now going to my estranged granddaughter, whom I had never even met in person. Michael's face paled, Clara's smirk faltered, and they both glanced at each other, disbelief written across their features. And finally Mr. Hendricks continued, "Any remaining assets, including jewelry, stocks, and personal collections, are to be allocated to the charity Margaret supported and to Doris, for her unwavering friendship and care." A stunned silence fell. The audacity of the act was not lost on them, yet their shock was silent, held in check by a misplaced sense of decorum. I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, savoring the justice of the moment. Then came the final envelope, addressed directly to Clara and Michael. Mr. Hendricks held it up, his expression carefully neutral. Margaret has left a letter for you both to clarify her decisions. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope, her fingers brushing mine for an instant in the process. Michael looked on, frozen, as she opened it. Clara read aloud, her voice faltering, "Dear Michael and Clara, I am aware of the choices you have made and the actions you have taken. I had hoped for kindness, respect, and understanding in the home I built. Instead, I was pushed aside, ignored, and ultimately removed from my own life. This decision is not made out of malice, but as a reflection of the values I hold dear. Respect, loyalty, and empathy are worth more than possessions or wealth. I hope this letter serves as a reminder that actions have consequences and that the measure of a person is not in what they take, but in what they give." The room was heavy with silence after Clara finished reading. She looked at Michael, her face a mixture of indignation and incredulity. Michael swallowed hard, the words settling like stones in his chest. Their plan to claim what they assumed was theirs had crumbled before them, replaced by a reality they could neither argue nor reverse. I watched. All resolution of what had been unjust. Clara tried to speak, her voice sharp but shaky. "Margaret, this isn't fair. We lived in that house, we helped, I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to." The truth was already clear, and their protest only highlighted the depth of their entitlement. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again, finally muttering something unintelligible under his breath. The weight of disappointment, embarrassment, and the sharp realization of their mistakes had left them temporarily speechless. After the reading, I left the office calmly, walking alongside Doris, who had accompanied me. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. I breathed deeply, letting the cool breeze wash over me, a physical reminder of the liberation I felt. The house, the possessions, the wealth all had been redirected thoughtfully, honoring loyalty, kindness, and genuine affection. I had ensured that the final act of my life reflected not anger, but integrity and wisdom. In the days that followed, word of the will's contents spread quietly among our family and community. Clara and Michael were met with a mix of pity and quiet judgment, as people slowly understood the scope of their actions and Margaret's strategic response. Yet, I felt no need to gloat. The satisfaction was not in public humiliation. It was in the knowledge that justice had been served with precision and grace. I focused instead on strengthening bonds with those who mattered, nurturing the relationships that had always been genuine. Sitting in Doris's garden one evening, sipping herbal tea, I reflected on the entire journey. Betrayal had been a painful teacher, but it had also revealed strengths I might never have realized otherwise. Quiet resistance, strategic action, and deliberate kindness had turned what seemed like a moment of helplessness into a testament to resilience and wisdom. I understood then that revenge, when executed thoughtfully and ethically, is not about cruelty, but about reclaiming dignity and affirming values. My granddaughter, when she eventually came into my life, was welcomed with warmth and stories that connected generations. The charity benefited, the loyal neighbor appreciated, and Clara and Michael were left to reflect on the choices they had made. Every aspect of the plan had unfolded precisely as I had envisioned. I had turned my exile into empowerment, betrayal into strategic insight, and injustice into poetic resolution. Looking back, I realized the depth of my own growth. I had endured loss, rejection, and betrayal, but had emerged not bitter, but wiser, not vengeful, but purposeful. The quiet moments of planning, the careful steps, the patience, all these had led to a final act that was both satisfying and ethical. Clara and Michael learned their lesson, yes, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my voice, my power, and my peace. In the quiet that followed, I often smiled at small memories, the laughter of old friends, the smell of Doris's baking, the simple joys of reading and reflection. Life had taken an unexpected turn, yet the turn had been guided by intention and clarity. I had navigated betrayal not with impulsive reaction, but with strategic grace. And in that, I found my true victory not in possessions, not in public embarrassment, but in the quiet satisfaction of having acted with dignity, foresight, and integrity. Moral lesson. Life will test you with betrayal and loss, but how you respond defines your strength. Quiet resilience, thoughtful action, and integrity are far more powerful than anger or rash revenge. Using patience and strategy, you can reclaim dignity, honor loyalty, and turn pain into purpose. True justice doesn't need shouting or humiliation. It needs clarity, wisdom, and heart. Every act of kindness and fairness builds a legacy far stronger than wealth or possessions. Even when hurt, maintain your values, act with intention, and trust that the world will reflect the honesty and courage you uphold.